Hello and welcome to the Mastering the Hustle interview series. I'm your host, Joel Calkins, and today I'm here with Tina Nole, who is the founder of Larj Media. Tina, thank you so much for joining us. Would you mind just taking a minute to tell us who you are and what it is you do?
Yep, I'm Tina Nole. I started Larj Media about 16 years ago after a long career in broadcast journalism. So here at Larj, we produce podcasts from idea to publication. We are largely B2B. So a lot of brands, thought leaders, think tanks, nonprofits. And then we do have some individual narrative stories as well. But we're kind of focusing, we're pivoting a little bit more towards branded podcasts. But we have a team of 9 in Seattle, a recording studio, and we record all over the world. So
it's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about your media company. You said you deal with B2B.
yeah.
If I was let's say a business owner or wanted to be seen as a thought leader, how would I engage with you? How would we get that started?
Yeah, so every client that comes to us comes often with an idea that podcasting is a technical problem to solve. Like I already have a story to tell. I just need a microphone, right? Like I don't understand that part, but I understand the story I want to tell. And though it is a technical problem, it's so much more than that. So when we first engage, we have a lot of questions with a new client. Like why a podcast over video over another channel? A. B, who do you really want to talk to? Who is this person that you expect to put your voice or your story in their ears a half hour longer, week after week, and then, come back to that and share it with their friends or do something, right? Go into your website, do a thing. So we really are audience first. We're storytellers first. We're content first. The technical stuff is table stakes, right? We have sound engineers. We have a recording studio. That's never going to be anything that our clients have to think about. What we do is dig really deep into the what and the why. So we start with what's called our Jumpstart program. I don't want to sound salesy. I'm not trying to sell you on our Jumpstart, but I'll just tell you how it works a little bit.
Please.
So it's something we just now recently discovered. We didn't do it with a client, and it was a real big mistake. So we now are like, everybody has to do this thing, and it really is pre-production. It's really getting to the nitty-gritty of who is your audience, what's the story you want to tell, and what do you expect people to do or think or feel when they take their earbuds out of their ears and they're done listening to your show? Are they buying your book, like going back to your website? Are you the symphony and you want a younger audience to come into the symphony downtown? So we look at all of those goals, and during this Jumpstart process, after we dig into that, we deliver 3 concepts to every client. Sometimes we get excited and they could be 5 because our creative team really kind of gets excited about some ideas. Yeah. So we come at that, and then we share our concepts with clients, and then they can pick. It's sort of a small, medium, large, that a concept that will absolutely achieve the goals that they want to reach. But each concept is unique to budget, resources and all of those things. And after they pick a concept, we're kind of off to the races. And that concept will be format. Is it an interview show? Is it a narrative podcast? Are we out in the field recording sound? Are we traveling to Ireland to talk to some head of state or something? Do you want to contain it with one story in the studio? So once we have that idea, then we begin to develop a content plan, a strategy around execution and sustainability. There's this crazy statistic that something like 80% of podcasts or more die after 3 episodes. So our aim is to create a really sustainable production over time to meet the goals that you want. So that's usually a 6 to 8 week engagement, where by the end of it, you have your roadmap to your full content strategy, your infrastructure. So how are you going to publish a thing? Where are you publishing? All that stuff. What's the thing going to sound like? What it's called, and an avenue and a whole production schedule. So you're really ready. It's basically idea to episode 1 in about 6 to 8 weeks. Oh, wow. So that's where we start. After that, they could take that in-house. So they're ready to do that podcast on their own, or they can, hire us to do the rest of the production. So it really depends on resources, effort, goals, audience, and all that stuff. So that section's idea to publication, then we do everything else, depending on what the client wants.
That's great. So a lot of what you described are some basic marketing principles that apply to podcasting, like who's your audience, what are you wanting them to do, what's your message.
Yeah.
So that's good to know for anybody listening to this or watching this, to understand, okay, this is a part of my marketing plan, or could be a part of my marketing strategy. How have you seen this, or could you give us an example of a time when maybe one of your clients incorporated this into their broader marketing or advertising plan? What was the impact for them?
Yeah, off the top of my head, Nick Hanauer is a great example. The show is called Pitchfork Economics. They came to us, with the idea they really wanted to get Nick's ideas out into the world and help people really understand. He's the kind of guy who has access to a lot of really big thinkers, and he's a big thinker himself. So he's having influence, but there's no audience there to hear that. Yeah. So when he came to us to build that out, he also wanted to build out his own acumen behind the microphone, which was, pretty easy to do with him because he's done a lot of public speaking. He got a book deal out of it. The show's now, I think, on its 5th season. I think it's fifth year. We did the first 2 years with it. He's influenced policy. He has now a whole media channel. And so the messaging that he wanted and the thought leadership that he wanted, I think he's on his 3rd book now. So the podcast became really the fertile ground for him to build a larger platform, around that. Another example is Microsoft. We did a show, we're still doing the show, called Pivotal with Hayat Galot. And the original aim on that podcast was to build her LinkedIn audience. So what they were using was they were harvesting material from the podcast to populate her LinkedIn. And that did its job. Now she met so many people, it became a bit of a lead gen, and it also created an avenue so that she was meeting customers face to face and having these deep conversations, kind of like you. If you're having these conversations with potential customers, you're learning so much. And now you're demonstrating your own thought leadership and your own ability to lead with curiosity, your values, whatever that is, out to a bigger audience. So now for her, season 2, we focused on AI because she and her team are really focused on AI. That show was originally an interview podcast that we did the interviews and then she narrated and told you the story after. She's grown now to where she wants to do the interviews herself. So now she's leading all of these one-on-one interviews with these very high up leaders. And we just did a show with the head of education for the UAE, talking about how the UAE is integrating AI in their education system. Like, it's nuts. So she started with this little podcast. It was like 6 episodes, and it's just kind of blossomed into really being the place and the medium that she's able to really talk to the audience she wants to reach. So I get real nerdy about it because I think it's such a powerful medium, and it's not just like I know that, right? I don't just believe it. Like it's just the truth that I've lived for the last 12 years, maybe even more the last 6 to 8 over the last 12 of having this company. But the medium just has a lot of power with that richness and that intimacy, as you know, like people in your ears for a half hour longer at a time is really powerful.
Yeah. Let's talk about that the power of the podcast. And a funny story earlier this week, must have been yesterday or maybe it was Sunday. I have 3 daughters, and one of them was talking about podcasts. And she's 21 now, but years ago they would have never ever thought about listening to a podcast. And then my youngest daughter, who's 16, chimes in and talks about podcasting. So it is growing. Like it seems like the audience and the demographic for this medium is really starting to grow. Have you experienced that in your own work?
Yeah, the data is showing it right now. The largest podcast listening demographic is that like 16 to like 25-year-old. That's the biggest growing number of podcast listeners. So the medium is not slowing down. It is just getting more. I think about it like books. Like books aren't going away, right? The book industry's changed and morphed, and people, read books differently than they did before, not necessarily going into bookstores as much, although I think they should go to your local bookstore, buy your book. But that industry has morphed and changed, but it's the people reading and listening are still growing. So the podcast industry is only 20 years old. So it makes sense that like people, the young kids, parents were listening to podcasts when they were 7 and 8 and 9, and they're like, what is that? What is that? And then now programming's meeting that. So it's all just going this way for sure. And there's a bunch of data on it. There's a company called Sounds Profitable that does a lot of work in the demographic, like really studying who's listening, where they are, how they're listening, and all that. So the data supports it.
Oh, that's great. So it's interesting, and I was reading the business journal that you were participated in, and talking about the long form and the power of that, which it does provide a different way of consuming information and reaching an audience, because in most media, it's very brief, right? Very short, very quick. You got to get the wording just right. But in the podcast world, you actually get to expand on ideas.
Right.
How does that change the perception of, or how have you seen this change the perception of the audience as it comes to either the person giving the podcast or what they're trying to share in terms of an idea?
What do you mean?
What I mean by that is,
so, yeah, can you...
instead of like a bite size, let me restate it. Often media starts with like a bite-sized snippet, and you try to convey, basically a message and maybe a call to action in a very tight format. Podcasting, you have the opportunity to expand on ideas, which has a different, it's received different by the audience.
Right.
How have you seen that impact?
So there's science behind this, and it's really cool. First of all, you have to think about the listener, and we do this a lot with my clients. I can't say enough about the intimacy of this medium. Putting earbuds in your ear, generally people are going about their day. You become a habit in their life. They're going to walk the dog, they're going to listen to your podcast. When they're commuting, doing the dishes, whatever, right? So you become part of their lives. The immersive, and because there's no picture and you're doing passive movement, your brain is working. It's a very sticky medium because of this. There was a study done by Berkeley, and a Harvard Business Review wrote about it too. I can send you a link, where because your brain is lighting up in all of these different ways, it's having to create the picture in the theater of the mind. So that means it creates memorable experiences with the podcast. So if the podcaster's talking about a dog, for instance, you will internalize that, and you might think about a dog that bit you before, or your childhood dog. So you remember the experience as if you had it yourself. So the medium is really powerful in that way. And that's that sort of long-term episodic listening that we're asking the consumer to do. They do it. And they do it for 30 minutes or longer, because it's as long as it takes them to do a thing. So if you think about it, you're walking your dog, you don't want to stop and change the mood, right? So often, like if you're on your way to work, you might listen to a podcast like yours. You might listen to a business podcast or Brene Brown or something that inspires you, that's going to kind of get you motivated for your day. Mm-hmm. But after work, when you're walking your dog and you're kind of over it, I listen to true crime. But I want to listen to the whole story. And I know I'm going to walk my dog for a half hour longer. And that's the experience I want during that time. So you can really keep them there and really share deep, rich, important stories or information, like news information.
Yeah.
The other crazy thing about that is that it also helps people create their own language around a topic. So if it's economics, if it's business, you're teaching them how to talk about that, because you become part of their regular life. So it has a very sticky, long life in the brain of a listener.
Well, that's
great.
That makes sense. No, it does. Thank you. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about your life as an entrepreneur. So you mentioned you've been in the podcast space, or you've been with Larj Media for, I think, 12 to 13 years.
That's right.
Tell us, how did you decide to go into this? Why did you go down the path of podcasting?
I was in radio for most of my career, and I had moved to New York, and I was working at CBS News, and it was short form news. And I loved the people there. I loved New York. I loved CBS News. but I wasn't crazy about short form storytelling. I was like, oh, we have to tell these little bits and pieces of news information. So I moved back to long form and worked at Air America. And that was another long form talk radio show. And then that company went under. And that's when I really started seeing the landscape of radio change massively. And I had done a bunch of great work in local radio in Seattle. And I was like, well, what am I really going to do here? The medium's changing, the landscape's changing. There's this new thing called podcasting happening. This was like 2011, about 2011, 2012. And so I started freelancing. So I came back to Seattle and I went to an old radio host of mine who's a famous chef in Seattle called Tom Douglas. And I was like, hey, man, you want to resurrect your show? But I'm going to start a business and you're going to have to pay me to make it. And he generously was like, yeah, kid, great. So it was great. And slowly but surely, I had a really big network in Seattle, former radio people and just PR folks, friends. And once I just, let people know I was around, I was getting lots of referrals. So it was just word of mouth, freelance. I mean, I had this little radio kit I made, like another, where it was out of a wine bag. I just put like microphones and cords, and I was schlepping gear around town as a freelancer. But I had these huge clients like Tom Douglas, Nick Hanover, and it didn't make any sense for me to be schlepping gear and being the sound engineer, the producer, the writer, the editor.
Yeah.
And so I began to just add folks. So I added an assistant. And meanwhile, my sister was in Silicon Valley, and she's 5 years older than me, and she's amazing. And I was calling her all the time, like, what do I charge? Like, how do I even stand up a business around this thing?
Right.
Should I even? What am I doing? I forgot to invoice people. I would always forget to invoice. It was like the one thing I couldn't get together. I'd be like, I don't know why I'm broke. Like, forget to invoice people. So I just had no infrastructure. I was a really creative brain. I just wanted to make stuff. I was very happy. So my sister, I convinced her 6 years ago to come along, and she has the business acumen, and she came along to like really help me scale this thing. So together we've grown it to what it is right now, which is 9 folks, a recording studio, and probably 30 to 50 shows under our belt, I think. So I got lucky having a sister.
No, for sure. Well, and it's interesting you say that, because a lot of people who are starting a business, they struggle with that, making that break from, I'm the person that does everything. I wear all the hats. I'm doing the sales. I'm doing the production in your case, or whatever that technical aspect of the business is. I'm doing the bookkeeping, but there's a point where that's just not feasible anymore. And that's where a lot of people struggle. So in addition to having your sister come on. Yes. Yeah. So in addition to having your sister come on board, how did you decide when to bring people on, and who were the right people?
The first person that was right for me was an assistant. I mean, if I had to do it all over again, maybe a bookkeeper. I did hire an accountant. So I had an accountant and an assistant. And there was a couple of reasons for the assistant. One was I just needed a doer of things, like that could wear a lot of hats. I needed somebody who was, fresh out of college and curious, so that they could kind of come into the medium with me. I need somebody to schlep gear. And I found myself, in front of clients that I looked like not the business owner. I was just the person kind of doing stuff. So it was really hard for them to see me as this business owner and then talk about my business later on and get me more work, right? Like help me grow it. So having an assistant was a really big piece of that. I mean, the account was really big. Bookkeeper, I never could figure out between bookkeepers and accountants what anybody did. I was really busy making stuff and trying to figure out the industry of podcasting, a new industry. So having just like a partner right away, which was like just an assistant, then I got a freelance editor. I personally didn't understand I was doing so much. It didn't dawn on me that maybe you really need a CEO or like a brain partner that doesn't want to do the creative stuff, that wants to handle the operations, that knows the answer to the question of who you should hire next.
Yeah.
Because I was just making it up. And she does know that. So the teams that we build are really great. So after the assistant, we moved on to actually public radio. She got like a huge job in public radio. And so then Joelle came on, and that was like, Joelle's my sister, and she really is the operations of the place. And after that was like editors and doers.
Yeah.
Plus accountants and lawyers. Those were two big ones too.
Yep, absolutely.
They all kind of came at once.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there's two things that you mentioned that I think are worth noting. One is the perception issue. Like you said, if I'm doing all the things, people don't see me as the owner. And maybe my prospects or even my clients don't necessarily see me in the light that I would want to be seen in.
That's right.
And so that's important for people as they're looking to expand their business, to make sure they're telling their own story or portraying themselves in the way they want to be seen by their prospects and their customers. The other thing you mentioned too that I thought was interesting is, even though you're wearing all the hats, when you started to bring other people in, like your sister, who had some skills that maybe you didn't have, or talented in ways that maybe you weren't gifted in, it actually enhanced your business. And so there's an opportunity when you start to give some of that away and you bring on a team, you're actually enhancing your business, in addition to just trying to save yourself some time and maybe stop things from falling through the cracks.
I couldn't have said it better. 1,000,000%. It changed everything. It also, it created some leadership challenges in my own brain and ego, and you have to kind of grow with your business. And so and then it also, the beauty of it is it opened my creative brain up to be thinking more about what's possible and to think more about our product. So we brought a sound engineer. Before it was just me. Now the sound quality goes up. And now I'm free to not think about that technical problem that I don't need to bother with anymore. Now I can think about a soundscape, or, can we record this in the field? What more can we do? And it left the creative possibilities to the business up to me. And that's a really beautiful thing, because now I don't have to, and I'm not even skilled at that. I'm not skilled at scheduling things or taxes or operational vision even. My sister's really great at the operational vision of this company. What's the team look like? What's our culture? How big do we want to get? How small do we want to stay? So those things aren't things that when you just start out on your own, you even know to think about. It's, for me in particular, was like, so, hand to mouth really at the beginning. It was like, I was working to work. And I knew I wanted something big. I had a vision of like, offices and doers and creative excitement. But the step from A to B was not a place. It was just a completely blank canvas for me. So to your point, it changed everything.
No, that's really good. And you mentioned your leadership has had to change or evolve as you brought these people on. Tell us about that. How have you changed as a leader throughout the years as you've grown and expanded?
I didn't even think I don't think I thought of myself as a leader before even. So even that changed dramatically. Massively learning about your own ego and how okay it is to be flawed and make mistakes and be open to creative input. Hiring people that are better than me was a really great thing. Like, they're better producers. That was something I'll tell you, 7 years ago, to think of that would have freaked me out. But maturing as a leader means I understand the importance of bringing people on that are better skilled than I am, that are smarter than me in these areas, that are growing, in different ways. That is a wonderful thing that scared me before. Managing conflict, building teams that work, empowering people to work really well together, and listening to feedback. All of those things were very new to me, and they've been incremental steps from my growth. Recently, I've really been thinking more and more about how I show up as a leader. One thing you said earlier is like perception. I don't want to seem frazzled too busy, like I can't handle it. That's not a good look for people that are expecting you to give them a paycheck every week, every week. Like there needs to be confidence in this business, and that confidence has to come from us. So that's kind of a new thing that I'm learning, because I do get overwhelmed and overfrazzled. And like, where do those boundaries stop and start with the people that work with you? So I'm at a place right now where I'm kind of looking out to see where I can get better skills. There were some workshops at South by Southwest. I missed one I really wanted. It was from creator to leader.
Oh, wow.
That's what I need. There's a gap there. Like, I know how to help people make all this stuff, but how am I, when I'm frustrated that they're not meeting deadlines? How do we navigate that together? Those are new skills for me. So it's a journey for sure.
Yeah. I can only
and
imagine.
instilling corporate culture is important too, right? Like we share this with everybody that we work with. Like, we live in a world of benefit of the doubt. We give each other the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that you're not meeting deadlines because you're a jerk or you're trying to be defiant. Like you're overwhelmed. How do we support you over making an assumption about why that exists in the first place?
Yeah.
So all these places are just constant. Every day is I'm fighting off Alzheimer's because I'm learning so much, I think.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you're probably learning a lot more than you can, contain at any given time.
That's right.
So Tina, this has been a really fun conversation. I do have one more question for you. Because podcasting is still in this growth stage, and it actually seems to be really growing exponentially. We talked a little bit about, younger generations starting to finally figure it out that their parents were onto something when they were listening to podcasts. Where do you see the world of podcasting and this type of media going in the next 5-10 years?
First of all, I think brands are finally realizing that if they don't have a podcast, it's like not having a website. I think that they're like, that brand space is growing tremendously. I think the line between video and podcast is being really melded together. Google Play got rid of Google Play and pushing everybody to YouTube. So that is changing the industry it's having us to all rethink how we create podcasts. Because before I was really passionate, still am, about this is a unique medium because it's in the ears, not looking at a screen. Now we're having to grow into what it means to like expand that. What we're doing now is really using the podcast as kind of the fertile ground for the rest of the content. So you're harvesting all this other content for TikTok and Instagram. And we just have to think bigger about this medium, like outside of just a podcast. It can be the everything. So I think that is a really important space. It's hard for me to tell. I'm really interested in where the medium is going to go when it comes to like news, because newspapers are so going away and the way we consume news is so different. There's some responsibility on journalists and how much it costs to hold up a newspaper. So it's going in all kinds of different directions. I think we're all still trying to figure it out. So much has changed in the last 2 years. AI innovations are drastically changing what I'm doing, from enhancing sound to making it more efficient in the studio, in editing, when we're writing scripts, to be able to transcribe and move content around as fast as we can using AI. So, I think sky's the limit. The industry is growing and morphing all of the time. My hope is that it doesn't become another tech industry. And there is a contingency of the community of podcasting pulling it into that world of tech. I saw it at South by Southwest and it was a little disheartening. So I'm hoping there's still a world where individual creativity is still growing.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see where it ends up, and how technology plays with that. So Tina, again, thank you so much for your time. If anybody wanted to learn more about what you do at Larj Media, where would be the best place for them to go to?
larjmedia.com, and we're LARJ Media. My mom spelled her name wrong on Facebook. That's how we got a name. It's a long story. But we have a capabilities deck on our website. It's pretty comprehensive. It really it demonstrates what we can do. And our FAQ section is also great. But email and LinkedIn. We're all on LinkedIn all of the time. So you can find me on LinkedIn and just TINANOLE.
Perfect.
So easy to find. And my sister's really active on LinkedIn. She's JOELLE, Joelle Nole.
Great.
Same last name.
There you go. Very good. Well, Tina, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Wish
so
you the
much. I'm
best.
really honored to be a participant on your show. It's been really fun.
All right. Thanks.